Right now, attorneys for Sean Diddy Combs are giving their closing arguments in the music mogul's racketeering and sex trafficking trial. The defense has been attacking the credibility of the government's case and the testimony of its witnesses, telling jurors that Combs is on trial for what the defense calls a swinger's lifestyle.
Combs's lead attorney has mocked the federal searches on Combs's homes and has used humor and sarcasm trying to slam the federal RICO charges. The defense has also painted Combs as an ambitious entrepreneur who broke barriers in the music industry. Combs faces up to life in prison if he's convicted on the most serious counts against him. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges that he's facing. Let's go to CNN anchor and chief legal analyst Laura Coates, who is there outside the federal courthouse. Laura, what's the latest?
This has been an amazing closing defense argument. We were waiting to figure out what they would say as the defense, and here we have it. It's a tale of two trials, they're saying. One, on the one hand, with the evidence and witness testimony tells you, on the other hand, what the prosecutors want you to believe, which is why they went into great detail about the kind of person that Sean Diddy Combs is, aspects of DEI and diversity ahead of his time in terms of corporate America, talking about love life and his lifestyle and things that you might not be able to relate to, but that is there. It was really a striking contrast in style and tone from what the prosecution gave. This one far more folksy, far more meandering, but in the same vein, trying to go to the heart of the matter to convince this jury that there is nothing to see that the government was invited into a bedroom of this particular couple. They own the domestic violence, but say that's very separate from what this really is, and they question, almost guffaw at the idea of this being a RICO case.
And Laura, how would you describe Combs' demeanor through all of this?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I pay attention when people think that no one else is watching. And so while there was a break and the jurors left the courtroom, do you know what was happening? I wondered, did Sean Diddy Combs, was he satisfied by his counsel? Well, at times he was smiling. He was interacting. He was talking to them. He was almost pantomiming and imitating his counsel while he was speaking. His daughters, who were in a row or two behind him, passed up a note through counsel and then looked back at each other and kind of gave a fist bump and smiled to their father in an encouraging way. There was also a moment as well where one of the daughters, one of his twins, was rubbing the back of his mother, who seemed to be very emotional during the testimony, or during the closing portion of the argument, where the defense counsel suggested this was a vulnerable person with whom he shared intimacy with Cassie and Jane, and almost suggested that he himself was being exploited in their now willingness to divulge different details about it. She had her head down, she was almost curled over, and one of the daughters was rubbing her grandmother's back, a very human moment indeed. And in fact, the defense counsel wanted everyone to know in that courtroom that his children, 6 of the 7, the youngest one being an infant, were there in that room. But the idea of a nod, there was a moment when Mark Agnifilo described Kid Cudi and that the now infamous attempted arson or Molotov cocktail of the car, and said, this is not the person Diddy is. He would have gone and confronted him. He's no coward. A cowardly act is the Molotov cocktail, to which Diddy nodded profusely. I'm telling you, everyone is leaned in today.
Laura Coates, live outside the courthouse in Manhattan. Thank you so much for the update.
Joining us right now is CNN legal analyst, criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson. This is a big day for the defense team, well, for the entire trial, let's be honest. Let's start with closings to bring us up to speed where we are. What did you hear as really the closing argument from the prosecution?
All right. So, Kate, good morning. So this is the essence, criminal enterprise. And there are all of these acts that go to establish it, like what? Like the kidnapping, like the arson, like the drugs, like all of the other lawless behavior that he engaged in, which would establish, ladies and gentlemen, the criminality of this enterprise over an extended period of time, which he was able to do because of his power, money, and influence. And by the way, as it related to the sex trafficking, prosecutors say this was coerced behavior. And it only takes one instance, say prosecutors, with regard to his coercion to establish that they were trafficked. And finally, the crossing of state lines with respect to engaging in prostitution, you got it. Receipts, records, all indications that he was doing it. That was the narrative that they gave the jury yesterday in the over 4 hours of information that they delivered.
I mean, you sum it up, as you always do, very well. But, I mean, it was over 4 hours that they were trying to link it together. But the burden of proof is on them. And so that is part of it, of course. Then it comes to the defense team. They're trying to present. I mean, they basically didn't present a case in court as they didn't call a single witness of their own. What does that mean for the task ahead for them today?
So what they did, and I think they're banking on, is that issue, you mentioned it, the reasonable doubt and the burden, right? The defense doesn't have to put on the case. The burden lies with the prosecution. They are confident. The defense is that they've laid out the reasonable doubt through what they've talked about through the whole trial. So what will they say? What they will say is that this is a legitimate business. This was private conduct. These were long-term relationships. And the fact of the matter is that this is not and doesn't amount to any criminal enterprise at all. And by the way, as it relates to this issue of criminal enterprises, usually you'll see a rat. You know what those are? Those are people in your inner circle who come and say, we agreed to do something illegal. Where are they, ladies and gentlemen? How do you engage in a criminal enterprise for RICO where there's no conspiracy? Did you hear one witness come in here saying there was an agreement with Mr. Combs to engage in criminality? No? Well, then he's not guilty of RICO. And with respect to the issue of this sex trafficking, these were long-standing relationships. The government came up here yesterday during their closing and they said, take one, it only takes one instance, but yet they have the nerve in their narrative to tell you he was doing things for over a decade of sexual exploitation. Which one is it? The reason they said you only have to choose one is because they don't have the goods, never had them, and they misled you because of the fact that these were willing participants. They will focus on that. And at the end of the day, if they're able to establish the defense that there is doubt with respect to criminality, legitimate, private conduct, nothing to do with the business, complicated relationships, certainly unconventional with regard to how he lived his life, but domestic violence, finally, you saw a lot of it. They need to embrace it. Domestic violence, we're not here for that. We're here for racketeering. We're here for sex trafficking. And at the end of the day, they have not established, the defense will say, the elements of the crime charge. Our client is not guilty.
And remind everyone, part of this whole thing is how hard it is to prove or to lay out the case for RICO. It's there's a lot of elements to it. I know none of it other than every time we cover a racketeering trial, it's always in-depth, complicated, and the bar is very high.
So, absolutely. So, as it relates to the whole sexual, exploitation and traveling from one state to another, that's clear cut.
Yeah.
But when you come down to RICO, what you're talking about is a pattern of behavior over a decade long where you're engaging in criminality, where you're doing all of this other lawless activity. But most importantly, there are people with you in your enterprise who are agreeing with you. And when you see these situations, Kate, it's these mob bosses. And then you have this underboss that comes in and they testify and they say, he helped me do it. He did it. We didn't see it here. Defense will exploit that today. Let's see how far it takes them.
Joey Jackson's performance of what the underboss looks like is quite
like
something.
That, huh?
I do. I would like you to do that more often because it's on a very serious matter and actually brings some levity. It's very good to see you.